Welcome back to the Midnight Circle. If you're new here, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell because tonight's story isn't just a tale of murder. It's a descent into silence and madness. They say the most terrifying screams are the ones you can't hear. And in a quiet city on Japan's eastern coast, one boy proved just how deadly silence could be. This is the story of Seisaku Nakamura, known to the locals of Hamamatsu as the Deaf Killer. Imagine Japan in the early 1920s, the soft whistle of wind through paper windows, the sound of temple bells echoing across misty hills. Now imagine being born into that world and never hearing a single sound of it. Seisaku was born deaf. No laughter, no lullabies, only the endless rhythm of silence. He was smart, brilliant even. His teachers admired him. His scores were high, and by all accounts, he could have been someone remarkable. But life wasn't kind. His parents saw him not as a blessing, but as a burden. His classmates mocked him, isolated him, whispered words he could never hear but could always feel. And slowly, something dark began to grow inside him, an ache carved by years of loneliness. If you ever felt invisible, you'll understand what was festering in his heart. As he got older, Seisaku found something that finally made him feel alive. Not friends, not family, but films. Old samurai movies, full of clashing swords, quick strikes, and quiet deaths. He didn't need sound to understand them. Violence spoke its own language. In the dim light of his room, he'd watch the swords flash across the screen, sharp, clean, powerful. Each movement, perfect, controlled. Each strike, final. It was in those moments that he felt something awaken inside him, the sense of power he'd never had. To him, the blade wasn't just a weapon. It was a voice that finally cut through the silence. Sometimes, when the world ignores you long enough, you start to imagine a world where you can make them listen, even if it's through fear. What about you? If no one ever heard you, if your pain never mattered, what would you do to make the world notice? August 22nd, 1938. Hamamatsu slept under the humid summer sky. A woman walked home with her friend after dusk, laughter faint in the air. She didn't know that behind her, in the still shadows between the lanterns, someone was following. A boy, barely 14. Silent footsteps, no warning. Just the gleam of a knife. He struck fast, clumsy but furious. They screamed, fought back, somehow escaped with their lives. And though both women gave a description, the police barely followed it up. Why? Because Hamamatsu was already uneasy. Japan was at war. And the police didn't want panic in the streets. So they buried it. They thought, it's just one attack. They were wrong. Because in the weeks that followed, 6 more people would die and no one would say a word. By 1941, Seisaku's mind had fractured beyond repair. He rarely left home. He spent nights sharpening blades, tracing their reflections in candlelight. Some nights, neighbors claimed they saw him standing outside motionless, watching his own house. Then came September 27. An argument broke out between Seisaku and his brother. Maybe it was over money, maybe over respect. But something inside the boy snapped. He lunged. The knife went through skin, then bone. The sound, though he couldn't hear it, vibrated through his hand. He turned next to his sister, then his father, then his brother's wife, and even the child. When it was over, the room was painted in red silence. Only one person died that night, his brother, but the rest would carry the scars forever. When police questioned the survivors, none of them dared speak against him. They knew what he was capable of, and they knew he was still in the house next door. Can you imagine living each day knowing the person who murdered your brother still breathes just a few walls away? A year later, August 30th, 1942. A quiet evening. Cicadas hum in the background. The war had grown worse, food was scarce, and fear hung over Japan like a fog. That night, Seisaku saw a woman returning home from the market, her arms full of groceries, 3 small children waiting at home. To her, it was just another night. To him, it was the beginning of something unthinkable. He followed her, step by step. The door closed, lights dimmed. Inside, the family sat down for dinner. No one heard the creak of the back door. No one noticed the shadow moving through the hall. When the husband stood up to check, it was already too late. The knife flashed once, twice. His body hit the floor before he could call out. The wife screamed. The children cried. But Seisaku heard none of it. Only the rhythm of his heartbeat and the soft pulse of blood against steel. Moments later, silence. When the police arrived the next morning, the scene froze them in horror. The parents were gone, 2 children lifeless. Only one survived, a girl too young to understand what she'd seen. She was the only witness to the night the deaf boy brought death into her home. Hamamatsu changed after that. The streets that once echoed with laughter grew empty after sunset. Doors locked early, windows shut tight. Rumors spread faster than the wind. They called him the Silent Samurai. Children whispered his name like a curse, and yet the police did nothing, because they knew who it was. But they also knew the country couldn't afford fear, not while soldiers were dying overseas. So they hid the truth, and for months the killer walked free. Can you imagine that? Living in a city where you know who the monster is and everyone just pretends not to see. But silence doesn't last forever. On October 12, 1942, the police finally moved in. They found Seisaku in his home, calm, expressionless, surrounded by knives. When they questioned him, he didn't resist. He simply signed, "I did it." In court, doctors said he was insane, but the judges disagreed. They saw no madness, just a boy who had decided to become a weapon. He was sentenced to death. 2 years later, July 24th, 1944, in a small, gray prison cell, he stood quietly as the rope was placed around his neck. No words, no screams, only silence. They say the executioner swore he heard something strange that day, a faint ringing like a bell. But there were no bells in that prison. What drives someone to such horror? Is it madness, hatred, or something deeper, the darkness that grows in those left unseen, unheard? Across cultures, legends tell of silent spirits, outcasts who return to take vengeance through quiet rage. Maybe Seisaku was no different. Maybe he became the myth the world made of him. Sometimes I wonder if someone had listened, really listened. Could things have been different? Or was he always meant to be the echo of a world that ignored him? Tell me in the comments, do you think monsters are born or created? The city of Hamamatsu has long since healed. The streets are bright. The noise of traffic fills the air, and no one speaks of the boy who brought death in silence. But if you walk there late at night, locals say you might feel it, the sudden hush, the air thick and heavy, as if the world itself is holding its breath. They say if you listen closely, you might hear nothing at all, and that's when you should run. Because sometimes silence means someone's still listening. If you enjoyed tonight's story, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves a good scare. Until next time, keep your lights low and your doors locked, because not every soundless night is peaceful.